I am Jessi Hempel. I am host of LinkedIn's flagship podcast, Hello Monday. I'm a senior editor-at-large here at LinkedIn. And this week, LinkedIn is kicking off a look at AI in work. Now, this is LinkedIn's global moment to help every professional thrive in the age of AI. You, as our premium subscribers, are getting exclusive access to today's conversation. It's designed to help you get even more out of all of our other offerings. Now, you're probably hearing a lot about AI tools, AI platforms, and AI features just everywhere you look. It can be wildly overwhelming. Today, we are going to go deep on how we make these changes. It's not about selecting the perfect feature. It's about building the habits that help you actually use AI with confidence, that help you stand out, that help you lead. Our guest expert for this conversation is Conor Grennan. Conor is the chief AI architect at NYU Stern School of Business, and he advises companies on how to use AI. Conor shows us how to build smart, sustainable AI habits that actually stick. Now, make sure to drop your questions for Conor in the comments early. We will have a lot of them. We will get to as many as we can live. And just a reminder, as a premium subscriber, you will get access to the full replay after the event. So if you want to rewatch or share this with a colleague, well, you'll be able to do just that. Let's get into it. Welcome, Conor. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Jessi. Thanks for having me.
So, Conor, I love where you begin when you talk about AI because you have a way of thinking about it that actually shifts the nature of what we need to be learning. You want to tell us about it?
Yeah, I mean, so we were talking about this a little bit before we came on, Jessi, but for me, it's good to know that I'm not a technical person. I'm not even very good with tech or anything like that. And when I first discovered all this, I realized very quickly that there wasn't really anything to learn. Like, you didn't have to learn machine learning, and you didn't have to learn AI, and you didn't have to be a digital native, despite what people say. The only thing you really had to do was to talk to a large language model like a person. Like, that was like literally it. And if you're listening to this broadcast, you're great at talking like a person. Like, that's like one of the number one things you do in this world. And so if all we have to do is talk to this like a human, then what is so hard about it? Like, why has the AI adoption been so slow? Like, what is it about this that trips people up and that has them thinking, well, I just don't know what to do with it. How do I use it? Where do I go with this? All that kind of stuff. And that's when we started to realize this wasn't something that you learn as much as was something that was a behavioral shift.
Okay, so first of all, is AI adoption so slow, or is AI coming out so fast that it just like breaks the brain?
Okay, this is a great question. So what I would say is that it depends on how we define AI adoption, because you can find statistics to really just tell you anything in this world, right? So
yes, you can.
when we say AI adoption is very high, I would say that a lot of people have used it. So, but one way I kind of like to think about it is that if I was in a room of 500 people and I say, hey, who here uses Excel? And everybody hand goes up, right?
Yep.
And then I say, okay, who knows at least like 10 formulas and has done one at least like $500 million deal? It's like the three, investment banker hands go up, right?
Yeah, my hand's going down right now.
Same, right? So
Sure.
Everybody's using it for, their personal budget and for making grocery lists in terms of Excel. So everybody's using it. But is that adoption? I don't know. I wouldn't say that's adoption to Excel. So what I would say is that adoption, to me anyway, is using it throughout the day, 10, 20 times a day for everything, not just work, personal, everything.
Well, there's this sense that everybody around you is using it, and they're using it in service of the work that they want to get done. And P.S., they're probably better at it than you. Mm-hmm. And P.S., you don't have an extra 3 to 5 hours in your day to figure out why, right? And that's why I love the approach that you take, Conor, because you really think of this not as a list of things you need to learn, but a way that you can restructure how you spend your time to allow for the learning.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think that we actually are approaching it all wrong. And I think we're approaching it all wrong because this is something like we've never seen before, right? Yeah. This is a software that literally behaves like a human. It doesn't behave in really any way like a software. I mean, it was as if you were texting somebody on the other side. So what's the problem? The problem is that our brains, and this is what we talk a lot about, our brains have a very hard time looking at something that looks like a search engine and pretending that it's a person. Your brain, just because of how automation and neural pathways work in your brain, doesn't really allow you to do that. And so kind of going back to that first point, every kind of tech has always been taught in this learning curve kind of way. If you were learning French or calculus or whatever, you learn, and then that's it. You're great at this stuff.
Yes.
But not if you were saying, like, say, like, I don't know, trying to get into better shape or something like that, better physical shape. All you need to do is eat fewer calories and exercise. And I know I'm preaching to the choir. I can feel my friends out there glaring at me, but I know that that's true. So if that's the case, there's nothing to learn. All you have to do is shift your behavior. So the problem is that we're treating this as if it's a technology that you have to learn, which has been typical of every technology we've ever had, as opposed to a treadmill, which is the only thing that matters is, do you get on the treadmill? You don't get off the treadmill because you don't know how to use the treadmill. You get off the treadmill because your brain prioritizes quick rewards and conserving energy, and this doesn't do that.
Well, I'm just going to tell you that I can tell myself 1,000,000 times over that I'm going to get on that treadmill.
1,000,000 times.
And then not get on the treadmill. And so reframing the challenge as a challenge of habit rather than a challenge of knowledge, I'm sorry to tell you this, Connor, it does not make it easier to grasp AI.
Yeah, right. That's exactly right. Yeah.
Look, I want to bring in the audience a little bit.
Yeah.
A few shout outs. First of all, we've got Eunice in Portugal, Javier in Georgia, Mariana in Berlin, Sergio in Scotland, Nuria in Spain. Such an international crew.
So cool.
We've got Per in Copenhagen. I'm going to bring in some of their questions,
Please.
though I still have a lot of my own. Okay, this one about AI for human growth comes from Natalie in the UK. Thank you for this. How do we use AI at work in a way that augments us and helps us grow our human skills without eroding our cognitive abilities by making us essentially lazy?
Next question. No, I'm kidding. No, Natalie, this is such a good question because this is what everybody's wrestling with, right? Like, how do you use this? So the first thing I would say is we have to get people actually using it a ton to sort of like augment ourselves. And I know we throw around the word augment, so maybe just to put a little more meat on that, if we just had AI doing the work, it would be terrible because there's no quality control. The amazing thing that Natalie's talking about here is the human has to be the one who's saying, like, that's a good answer, that's a bad answer, et cetera. That's the only thing that works in work. If you just have AI sort of like spitting this out, how are you possibly to know whether it meets your company's values and everything like that? However, I think Natalie's getting to a really interesting point around something like critical thinking, right? And so we were just talking about this. This is what I do with my son, Finn, who's 16, around how do we get like young people critically thinking? How do we make it so that they don't lose that? Because the ironic thing is, and LinkedIn did phenomenal work on this about the bottom rung of the career ladder breaking. When that starts to snap, the only thing that's really going to allow people to kind of like jump over that lower rung is if they, as Natalie says, if they're critical thinkers, if they're using this to really augment themselves rather than replace. It's the only solution. We have to find a way forward on it.
Well, so I think that there's so much concern over this idea, this amorphous idea of critical thinking, right? Because I look at this next question, it comes from Prab in the UK, who's very curious about what he calls dangerous AI work habits. He says, what's the most dangerous AI habit that professionals are forming right now? And he's interested in, is there a habit that feels productive now but actually risks hurting us long term?
So I have some weird thoughts on that. Like, for example, like I kind of think that AI note-taking is the most overrated feature on any product, even though we love Microsoft.
But I love AI note-taking.
I know you do. And my gosh, but we should turn this to like a Maury Povich debate-style show. But here's the problem. I find note-taking really helpful for me processing. So what I would think is that like it's great to process all that yourself, but then have it as a companion to help you figure out the note-taking after that. So when I just think about, well, what skills are going away that might be dangerous, I think that's number one. I think number two is overly trusting AI. And I'm a huge evangelist, but there are a few things, like you have to understand that it can hallucinate, lie very convincingly. You have to understand that it's sycophantic, which means it's going to tell you, which I love when it tells me I'm right and I'm great. And Connor, another great idea, but it's actually not super helpful. And then the third thing is it drawing the right context out of the internet? So if we don't understand that these things can take us off the rails, that feels like the most dangerous work habit.
Okay, so you called attention to three things, which you just like dropped in. Like, of course, everybody knows. Of course, everybody knows that it hallucinates, and a good deal of what it delivers us as fact is like very far from fact. Right. Of course, we know that it's sycophantic, and it always thinks that you are the main character of every story, and you're amazing and beautiful and amazing.
Thank you, Jesse.
And of course, it delivers absent the context that we would need to fully understand what we were reading. Those, of course, are easy to overlook.
Yes.
All right. So how do we systematically add in a habit of reflection so that we don't miss that when we're working fast?
Habit of reflection is actually a great term there. And I think that what you're talking about there is how do we not go black or white here? How do we not say, well, it lied to me, so I can never use it? You know a lot of these people too, right? They're like, oh, he gave me the wrong answer. I don't trust it at all. That's not right, because 99% of the time it gives you great answers. And then there's the other part that says, oh, this is amazing. I'm just going to take whatever it gives me and send it off to my boss. We've seen this in legal, right? Where they're like sending things in front of the judge and like the judge is like, that case doesn't actually exist. And the guy's like, what happened now? So the problem is people are over trusting it, under trusting it. The fact is, when I say this is a software that behaves like a human, I really kind of mean it literally. I know it's not a human. I know it's not. But what I mean by that is if you have somebody that you're working with and they give you an answer or they give you a product, it is your job as the manager of that person to make sure that it's correct, quality, everything else. That person's not always right, they're not always wrong, but it's more dangerous, I would say now, when they're almost always right. And you get lazy and you just take their work product and you give it to your boss because you're like, this person's almost always right. But what if that time they're not? And so I think that what you're talking about there is like this quality control that has to come from the human brain.
It strikes me that there are people in my life who are right so much of the time and with such authority that I don't question whether they're right.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel so different. Okay, this question concerns creative leaders' AI habits, and it comes from Anjan Das in India. What AI habits do you recommend for creative leaders so that we can not only just spruce up our workflows, but also ensure the originality, we're just talking about this, brand consistency and team adoption in the long run?
Yeah, so this is where we're heading, I think, with all of this. So I have a company called AI Minds, and we work with big companies, and we drive adoption at scale. But what we realized was the first group we had to work with was leadership, right? Because when we worked with teams, it was great, amazing employee engagement, but they would just kind of take their 8-hour day and make it into a 6-hour day.
Yeah.
Or the shorter tenured people would start to outperform senior tenured people, total disaster. So what we realized was if we didn't have leadership really using this, and I'm talking like leadership spills their coffee, are they taking out ChatGPT or Copilot or whatever and seeing, hey, I just spilled my coffee, what should I do? It's that level of fluency with that. And if leaders understand that, then they will start to understand how everyone in the organization can use it. So of course we can have a digital course that trains everybody in the organization, but until leaders are setting new benchmarks for the organization, until they're understanding what new job descriptions look like, new recruiting, and especially messaging, to your point, so that people are not afraid, then creativity won't even matter. Now, on that front about creativity, I think that this can be extremely creative if you're sort of like building off your human expertise. In other words, people say, can this be creative? Yes and no. It can put together disparate ideas, but you have to decide whether they're good or not.
You have to actually add the creative part.
Yeah, you have to, right. You have to be the judge.
Well, okay, so this question, we've got a lot of people in our audience who are actually between jobs or they're thinking about moving, right? This question comes from Tim Lewis in Washington, D.C., who says, how can leaders between jobs build or accelerate these AI skills without corporate resources during a job hunt?
Okay, this is Tim in DC. Yeah, so Tim raises a great point. What do we do in this era where more and more companies are saying, we want people with AI skills? So first of all, I want to say to Tim and everybody is, you already have the skill you need. You don't need to learn anything else. What you need to do is change how you work and change how you think. But there's two parts to this. Number one is you just have to get fluent on AI. So what we say is, it's easy to just say, just eat less and exercise, as we were talking about. But how do you actually change that behavior? So the number one thing I would say is that remember that it's not a search engine. It will look like a search engine. Your brain will tell you it's a search engine. It's actually a person behind that. So that's number one. Number two, I think what you have to do is start asking it just to get started. Questions like empathetic questions, personal questions. It'll help on that. But then the holy grail here, this is what we think about all the time, is not whether you can use it. It's can you expand it to your team? And what I would say to Tim and others is, if you can come into a company and say, I have a few processes that will get everybody else. So the reason that we teach the way we teach,
right?
And because we teach a ton of huge companies, the way we teach is not about can this person get good at AI. It's can this person spread that to their team? Can they create new processes with AI?
I love that. I think one of the things that Tim is trying to figure out is like, when you're in a company, you often get the resources to take the course or use the software that everybody else is using. When you are home and you are thinking about what's ahead of you and you are out on the internet trying to piece together the tools that are going to allow you to experiment, where does somebody like that start? And, this can be deceptively simple. Is OpenAI, ChatGPT like the right front door?
Right. I think it's the right front door. I would say that we're probably over-indexing on thinking that your company has to train you on AI. It doesn't. You are going to train your company on AI. I cannot tell you how firmly I believe this. Companies don't really have a good sense of where they're going with AI. And why is that? Because Number one, they're treating it like a digital transformation. And it acts nothing like a digital transformation. It has everything to do with change management. I could talk about a lot of statistics, but it would be painfully boring. But the point is that leadership has to lead by saying, hey, I understand that this is really hard. But people coming into companies, people who are looking for jobs, et cetera, they're going to be the ones who are going to bring the processes in. So if you just come in and say, I'm great with AI, what good is that? That means that I've just hired somebody that can do their work in 6 hours rather than 8. What I want to hear from leaders, and what leaders want to hear, I'm telling you, I hear from every single day. I talk to big leaders of big companies. They say, I want somebody to come in and say, let me help you with this process. We don't even teach I talk about AI mindset, that's my company. We don't even teach in use cases anymore. We teach in processes. Because in a use case, you can either grab that use case and use it in the day or not. But if you're already good at getting from point A to point B in your day, beginning of the day to end of the day, you may not use it. You're just like muscle memory. But if all of a sudden you can create a process where everybody has to do it, it's going to upskill everyone.
Okay, so this brings us to our next topic, which is like how we improve our output by just thinking about this through a new framework.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So talk to us about that.
Yeah, I think the new framework really has to be understanding that when we get caught in this like use case trap, all it does is limit our thinking about what this is, right? So like there's a lot of amazing software out there, like, Excel, everything else, but they all do one thing, right? Salesforce is, CRM system, it does one thing. One of the reasons that we don't teach in use cases is because it limits what the power of what this thing is. So as a very general framework, what I would sort of say to people is, and we sort of like have a lot of these frameworks, but I'll kind of like talk about an overarching one, is the reason why we don't do use cases is it's like this. Imagine you have a time machine, you go back in time to whenever before the light bulb was invented, you give them the light bulb, they're like, this is amazing, it's going to change the whole world. Imagine then you went back a month later and you said, I have something even more powerful. And they're like, what? And you're like, I have electricity. It's infinitely more powerful. They're like, no way. They're like, yeah. And then you're like, look, I promise this is going to change your life. And they're like, okay, great. What are the use cases for electricity? Like, what do you say? Like, nobody wakes up in the morning and is like, how am I going to use electricity today? Right? So the framework has to be start with your work, not with what the tool can do. That changes everything.
So really, like, I actually love this metaphor. So it's opening ideas up for me. Really what you're saying is like, we're not gonna get a book that's going to tell us where to use this and how.
Right.
We're not going to be able to think our way into this future.
Right.
We're going to have to start tinkering and see what evolves.
Yeah.
And collectively, if we don't choose to participate in the tinkering, we'll just have to take what evolves. But this is actually an opportunity for us, right?
Huge. And I love that you phrase it like that because this is where leaders need to be thinking, right? So there's 4 things. We call this like the 4 horsemen of the AI adoption apocalypse. I know it's a stupid name.
Wait. I mean, you're going fast here. This is good. The 4 horsemen of the AI adoption apocalypse.
Isn't that a great term? I know it's kind of dumb too, but for my international audience, I'll say it fast. Sorry, I know I talk so fast, my international friends. The 4 horsemen of the 4 horsemen of the AI adoption apocalypse. These are 4 things that I think every company does that when we work with companies, we don't do because they don't work. Just to list them real fast.
Okay.
Number 1, the lighthouse case. Hey, here's what IKEA is doing. It's not actionable. The lighthouse case doesn't work in this case. Number 2, the tool rollout. We get this all the time. Somebody has bought 10,000 Copilot licenses. Copilot's phenomenal, but they bought 10,000 licenses. It's sitting on desktops. And it's like thinking that you can put a treadmill in every house in America and you're going to cure heart disease. It doesn't work that way. It's a behavioral shift. Number 3 is the use case thing, as we were just sort of saying. Like nobody wakes up in the morning and is like, how am I going to use electricity today? Instead, you say, this is what I have to do. The room is dark. I got to send an email. I got to get from New York to Denver. You use electricity for the things you have to do. And the 4th thing, and this is going to be controversial a little bit, but the AI champion. I love the AI champion system. But if you're relying on AI champions to drive AI adoption, they're not able to do it. The quick analogy here, and then I'll stop, is if you want to get everybody on your team doing yoga every morning, and you have somebody that does yoga, that person can teach everybody the yoga. I don't know yoga clearly, but the moves, whatever those things, whatever these are, the pigeon thing or whatever, all that stuff. The problem is, at the end of the month, everybody will be amazing at yoga, but they won't be doing yoga every morning. One is a learning curve, and the other is a behavioral shift.
Right.
So those 4 things tend not to work.
Okay, so we all know now that we're not going to hire Connor to teach anybody yoga, by the way.
Yes, LinkedIn Learning.
And I love this point that you make about the AI champion. I want to bring some more questions from the rest of y'all in here. This one comes from Monica in Ohio. It says, the volume of AI resources available is overwhelming. It's true. Is there a best practice for easier evaluation?
Yeah, it's a good question from Monica because especially on LinkedIn, I don't have to tell you, Jesse, the amount of information that we hear about AI is overwhelming, right?
Yes.
So that's number one. So number one, find people you trust on LinkedIn and follow them. They're probably going to be really good at that kind of stuff. And I post, as I was just saying, I post about this stuff every day and try to do it in a very simple, very non-technical way. But I think more importantly, like when we think about how to keep up with the news, do you have to keep up with the news? Like, in other words, Dario Amodei, who's the CEO of Anthropic, which is the Claude ChatGPT competitor, said a little while ago that this is really going to impact, large language models will impact, I don't know what he said, something like 25% of the white collar workforce.
Yeah.
But what he said, more interesting, which I totally agree with, is that's true even if the technology stopped today. I would say even if the technology stopped last year. So all these news coming out, it's like, now you have 10 PhDs in your pocket. I'm like, do I need 10 PhDs in my pocket? So the problem isn't keeping up with tech. The problem is, can you use what's available right now?
I love that. Okay, we've got a lot of folks in our audience who are working in small business and very curious about the ways in which AI can really speed along some things that were maybe not available to them in the past. And this is a very specific question. It comes from Namani in India, who says, I work in startup investments. How can I build a robust workflow for quick decision making?
Okay, here's what I would say. Because I get this question a lot, especially when I'm working with like asset management or something like that.
Yeah.
And sometimes I get question, love my asset management friends out there, but sometimes I get the question, how do we surface better opportunities, et cetera, et cetera? And what I say to them, with all due respect, I'm like, that's why you get paid, man. Like, this is your job. So what my job is to augment how they think. So what I say, especially in finance, almost more than anything else, I say, talk to me about what you do now.
Yep.
So they'll walk me through their process. I'm like, okay, in all these steps, here's where AI can augment that. In other words, if I wanted to go from New York to Denver, I can't just go from this chair, we're in New York right now, I can't go from this chair to Denver, Colorado, right? What I can do is I'll do some of the work myself. I'll walk down to a car, and then I'll take a car. That'll speed me along, and then I'll take a moving walkway, and then I'll take the airplane. But there are times where I just have to keep up, pick up my bags and walk. And so what I would say is break down what you do and then see what AI can augment in those different steps.
I love that. I really love that. And here's the thing, Connor. I've got another question for you, and this one really gets into habits. And I'm going to ask you for this one, let's slow it down a little.
Yep, got it.
Because we want to bring everybody along with us. Okay, so this question comes from Liz Grennan. Can you talk about chaining? Because I find it a useful habit prompt.
Yeah, I think it's such a great prompt. Here's, people ask a lot, and thank you for the question. People ask a lot about what's a good prompt framework. Yeah. And I would say, we don't teach prompt engineering, but let me give you the only prompt framework you'll ever need. And chaining is one of those pieces. Here's how it works. TARC. Now, for a second, Jesse, I just want people to forget about AI that exists. Imagine you had a new colleague. How would you be a good manager to that new colleague? You'd give them a task. But you'd explain it, you'd explain the purpose, you'd explain, hey, this is why we're doing this. That's a good manager. The next thing a good manager does is adding context, okay?
Yeah.
Here's everything you need to know. Here's what the client does, here's what we do, you add context. The third thing you do is then they come back and you go back and forth. You're like, that's good, but I would change this, and maybe let's change this around. So that's refining it, right? And then the fourth thing, as Liz mentioned, was chaining. Then you give them another task. So I say all that.
So that's what chaining is, because I'm going to tell you the truth. I didn't know what chaining was.
So here's what chaining is in this case. If we think about that as just working with a person, it's the same thing with working with a large language model. Give it a task, be explicit, give it context, refine, and then chain. Here's the biggest thing that people miss. What's the next thing you're going to do? You'd never send your new colleague home at 10 a.m., right? What people forget to do is what's literally the next thing you're going to do. And I can't tell you how often people miss that.
That's so, as you say this, I think about my 7-year-old and how when I tell him that he has to take a bath, that the only way we're going to get effectively through that is I then follow it up by, and then you get to watch TV, and then you get to have your ice cream.
I love that. It's chaining. You're just giving them a vision for the next thing.
Okay, so this question comes from Landry Burns in Texas, interested in the daily AI workflows. Landry says, I have been building custom GPTs and refining system prompts. Outside of that, what are some other workflows or daily habits you'd recommend to get the most out of AI?
So if you're already there, if Landry's already there and building custom GPTs, building workflows, he is well on his way. I think there's two things I would say to Landry. Number one is you can always go deeper. And I think the chaining part that Liz mentioned before is so critical, because a lot of times people will have a workflow, but then just because of their muscle memory, because think about like how you use a search engine, right? It's a command response, walk away, and then you do your work. A lot of people will just use their large language model, Copilot, ChatGPT, whatever it is, and then they will take, get a project done, and then they'll move on. But in this case, start chaining them together. That's number one. Number two, the holy grail is can Landry explain that to other people? And that's when this is what we do a lot of, but that's when you start to talk about what it means when your brain is sort of like thinking this as a software instead of a human.
Okay, so I want to dig into that piece a little bit more, because that's an unlock for me. So here you are, and Landry, like a lot of people in our chat, by the way, if you're here today, it's probably because you already are playing with these tools,
100%.
right? You want more out of them. So you're at a place where you're actually building the custom GPT, you are using it. A way that you personally can get more out of it is to enroll somebody else in using it to teach them what you're doing. Mm-hmm. That kind of intuitively makes sense, but is it because when you begin to explain your process, you yourself will see your holes?
Oh, okay. Now you're blowing my mind. I wasn't going to say that, but I'm going to steal that answer for future reference. But I would say the other part is, part of that is true, right? So at the business school at NYU Stern, we always say, teach it to somebody else, and that's how you're going to learn it best. You'll see the holes in your own process. But I would say more importantly, not more importantly, but equally importantly, if you are working on a team, I'm telling you the frustration of some people out there is like, guys, just use it. Just talk to it like a person. Just find your use cases. Why isn't my whole team using this? We could be on fire. We could all have jetpacks on. It's like saying, guys, just eat less and exercise. I cannot possibly do that. I have a cheeseburger there. There's no way I'm not eating that cheeseburger. Come on. So in fact, what I think that people really need to do is think, it's not just about me. It's how do I get other people using it? By the way, professional services, the McKinsey's, PwC's, Deloitte's, Accentures of the world, this is what they have to do. They can't just say like, come on, guys, you have to use it. They have to understand. And what the big unlock for me was understanding this was about our brain. Understanding that when our brain sees ChatGPT or a large language model, what's happening in your brain, this took a lot of research, is understanding that your brain is actually seeing a search engine. Mm-hmm. And it's happening for everybody. And why is that? Because of muscle memory. Like it's what you've seen every day for the past 20 years. So what's happening there? What's happening there is that your brain goes into command, response, walk away mindset, right? It goes into sort of that muscle memory. And that's why people aren't getting that much out of it. So if you can help people understand, hey, don't worry, your brain is functioning normally. That's why you're not using this well, because you're thinking of it as a search engine. Think of it literally like a person. Name it if you have to. I'm going to get in trouble for that. I know. But that tends to be best practice for adoption is if you, and it's not a human, but if you think of it and talk to it as if it was a human, it's incredibly powerful.
Because it gives you the right language to use.
Yes.
Not because any of us should make the mistake of thinking
Agreed.
This is a
Totally
replacement
agreed.
for a human. Now, here's another question that comes from Kumar in Washington, D.C. Ooh, and I like this question because it gets to time in the way that we all always feel so much pressure to move fast. If you had only 2 hours to train a team, what would you teach and practice?
I only take 2 hours to train a team. So that's what we do when we train leadership teams or anybody. We don't take more than 2 hours. These things, and I get it when 6-week courses, but I'm like, why? What do you need? So what we do is we go through, first of all, what your brain is doing wrong. And essentially what your brain is doing wrong is it's seeing a search engine, and that's kind of getting locked in. And so it's going into muscle memory of how you work with a search engine. That's number one.
So basically, to understand that, number one is like, I look at this box and I think this box should be Google. So I'm like, restaurants, one block.
Exactly. Well said, right? Because all you're doing is giving a command and getting a great response. Now, here's the trap that everybody falls into, is that it will give you a much better response. And when I say Google, I mean Google search engine. Obviously, like Gemini is much better. But when you get a response, it's so much, from a large language model, it's so much better than your Google search that you're like, this is amazing, let's walk away. But all you've done is create a better search engine for yourself, a search engine that explains a little more instead of, well, that's not really what I need. I really need this. And if I'm going to do this, well, how do I kind of create in your kind of analogy there, like, how do I sort of like take my wife out for a great date, or what should we do after that? Or how should I think about this? Or even, do I even want that kind of food? Or was that kind of food good for me? I'm celiac, or all that. There's a million questions that you could follow up on, but our brain, because we could drive in the rain and have a conversation, muscle memory is very powerful. Instead, it's just seeing it literally as a search engine instead of like a person. So I think the big problem here, and the number one thing I would tell people is that.
Okay, so here's the tricky part, right? So you are prompted to move into conversation, and where should I take my wife? And maybe my wife is a celiac, or maybe in the case of my wife, she's gluten free. And pretty soon, you and your ChatGPT, your Claude, are deep in conversation, such that you feel like you've left with great recommendations. You then have to fact check them. And I'm just going to say that the design of most of the software out there does not naturally remind you to do that, right? You left feeling like you got solid information from a friend who maybe is actually just piecing together patterns on the back end of words instead of numbers to give you your results.
It's okay. I'm so glad you brought this up, because fact checking is everything. I think it's when we work with big enterprises, it's the number one reasons big enterprises don't want to adopt. It's like, well, how do we know if it's right or not? So I get this with law firms sometimes where they're saying, well, the problem is that our junior lawyers are using AI and they're giving us wrong answers. What should we do? And my answer is, you should fire that junior lawyer. And I don't mean literally, but do you see what I'm saying? Like, they're responsible for quality control.
Well, this idea of accountability shifts entirely as we begin to build these tools into our systems, right? And we would like to think that there is always somebody to take responsibility for what the LLM spits out at the end of the day, but we are also moving into new territory. And so, while it would actually be easier to fire the junior lawyer at your firm, we also have to figure out in every domain, personal and professional, how to take responsibility for that truth.
I think so. And by the way, of course, like, I'm very pro people. I would never sort of say fire somebody. My point really is, imagine if you had a junior colleague and they came back. They were great. You hired them, you spent a lot of money, and they came back to you with something wrong. You could fire them, which you wouldn't do. Forget AI for a second. Or you could go fire the person who recruited that person, or fire the person who trained that person, all those things. Or you could just say, we probably need a quality control mechanism in our relationship. Forget AI for a second, right? That's just how it works.
Right.
All this is doing is saying, with AI, all that person is doing is like letting the AI flow through them. And if they want to just copy and paste, okay, that's on them. But somebody has to do quality control. And if you are a person that's not doing quality control, then you are the one that should get in trouble for that. Like, to rely on this too heavily is to sort of say that, oh, the large language models have to be perfect. Humans aren't perfect. Humans hallucinate all the time. It has to be quality control by the person. And by the way, that's a great thing because it makes the person really think through it and add instead of just copy and paste.
I love the fact that you're right. Humans hallucinate all the time. Okay, here's a question from Caroline Fatchett in New York. If you were to recommend the top 3 daily practices for people just starting on AI, what would they be?
Yeah, I would say that number one, and if you're really just starting and you're trying to think, what should I use this for? The number one thing I just want to point out to Caroline and to others is, it means that your brain is working normally, okay? Just super quick, 2 ninth grade classes. One is like, write a 3-page paper on anything. What? Like anything at all. Next one is like, write a 3-page paper on 3 people you met this weekend and how they made you feel. This first one should be easier. The second one is easier.
Always.
That's because the brain needs templates. The brain does pattern prediction automation very well. So when we have like a ChatGPT window and we're sitting there, maybe Caroline is one of these people, or maybe she knows people, and they're like, I don't know what to do this for. That's because your brain is, it just freaks out on this, right? It's just like, I don't know what to do. That's why they have conversation starters now. So what I would say is, first of all, take a deep breath and recognize that you have everything you need and that your brain is functioning normally when you're having trouble with it. Then I would say the number one thing is to talk to it in a personal way. Hey, I'm a little stressed about this, or I'm a little worried because this, or I have stage fright, or I'm stressed about whatever, or I need a new plan for, and just see, because it gets you in a conversational mode with it. And that is the single best thing you can do. Get it into conversational mode, because then you think, well, if it just helped me with this, I wonder if it can help me with this. So I wouldn't even sort of like think about a framework like, first find your use cases, then, because it's like saying, just eat less, first buy a salad, then go out for a run. Like, that's not helpful. What's helpful is just do this, because I think what you'll find is this acts much more human than you think and is much more helpful than you think.
I love that. Okay, I want to get to our third topic, which really concerns how we position ourselves as leaders around AI at work. It is not enough to experiment with this stuff. It's not enough to be able to use this stuff effectively to be productive in our work. We need to take that extra step of enrolling the people around us in understanding that we can be leaders in AI.
Yes.
It's so critical whether you are looking for your next opportunity or whether you are living in an organization now. Boy, do we have a lot of questions on this. Okay, and I just want to give a few shout outs. We've got Lisa in Texas, Mark in South Africa, Norberto in Brazil, Lewis in London, Tariq in Ireland, Aaron in Montana, Gonzalo in Chile. We got a lot of folks with us. This question comes from Anderson in San Francisco. How can professionals who consistently integrate AI into their daily workflows position themselves as innovators, not just adopters?
Okay, this is a fantastic question. And first of all, to our international audience, again, apologize for the rate at which I speak. I know it's unbelievable. Try to watch this on like 0.5 speed. I think that how you position yourself as a leader and not like an innovator, not just an adapter, is huge. And it comes down to one single thing, and that's, can you get other people around you to do it? Okay, that's it. If one person is using it, it's not particularly helpful. What we found, just a quick story, when we started training organizations, we used to just train teams. But as I was saying, like, that team would just, it wouldn't systematically hit revenue. You know what I mean? Like, they would sort of like all become great power users. But at the end of the day, nothing was really happening that was like really moving the needle on revenue. So first of all, that's why we work with leadership teams all the time to sort of like help them figure out how to benchmark. But the second thing is, and I think that this is really overlooked, is, so first of all, you use all these techniques, and we have a lot of them, obviously, in how do you get other people to do it? It's the yoga problem. So if you can get people to shift their behavior, that's great. If you can then focus on process rather than use case, like, hey, in this, every day we're going to go through this process, and it's too long to explain right now, but that's what we do a lot of. And then the third thing is the time management. Yeah. So I hear from CEOs at really, really big companies all the time, hey, we're all using this. This is great, but we're not capturing this. So what's happening there? What I would say is that we kind of just fill up our bag. You know, if you bring a big bag on vacation, you fill it up. So people are just doing more emails, more everything else. What I would say is you have to, and this is not an AI problem. If you know and you're confident that you've saved 2 hours this week using AI, and there's no way you don't, what are you doing with those 2 hours? You have to put them in a lockbox and open it up on Friday, and not necessarily do like a hackathon or anything, which are great too, but like take that 2 hours and try to rethink, how would this team as a whole completely transform itself if we rethought our processes altogether? And you use AI for that. But so much of this is when you have productivity gains, what do you do with those gains?
You put that on, I haven't really thought it in this way before. You're speaking to a sort of universal truth, which is the more tools we have to make our work better and faster, the more time we seem to put into the tools rather than actually taking back that time and putting it against the things we care about. I've always thought of that as a systemic problem, and you're saying, it can also be an individual problem, and you can choose to tackle it as an individual.
It also makes you stand out in your team. I think what people see is leaders don't even know what to ask for anymore. So if there are leaders out there, like, what you want to sort of like look for is not just people who know how to use AI, but a proven track record of getting other people to use it too and setting up new processes with AI. But you're exactly right. These universal truths, and you and I were talking about this before, we can talk about AI, but if this is a software that behaves like a human, it means that we're dealing with human problems and human sort of like limitations. And so when we have like a 3-part framework called like learn, execute, strategize. And it's not about use cases easy to advanced. It's all about, why are we flawed decision makers? Why are we flawed communicators? We're flawed communicators because you can't possibly get into the head of everybody around you. But what if you had this tool that imitated human behavior unbelievably well, and you could kind of go back and forth? Anyway, point being, these are human problems. They're not technical problems.
Okay, well, this question comes from Arlene Thornhill in Florida. Thank you, Arlene, who says, what can leadership do to emphasize that AI is a tool for augmentation, not replacement?
Oh, I love this question, because it's, if you don't get this right, nothing else matters, right? Don't you think? I mean, and we see this on LinkedIn all the time, people coming up and being like, well, am I going to, what's going to happen with my job? We tell leaders that there is a best practice, at least that I found a best practice. Also, McKinsey did a great study that backed this up too. CEOs, first of all, just need to be using it. So that's number one. McKinsey showed that as well. I love that idea. But the second thing is, number one, the leaders, and you had Brene Brown on, I watched that interview, it was absolutely phenomenal. If people haven't checked that out, they have to check it out. Brene Brown sat in this seat. But the point that she talks about all the time is vulnerability, and how it's not a soft skill. And I would push that even a step further. I would say that vulnerability is the thing that's going to get productivity out of your organization in this particular case. And here's how. Leadership, instead of saying, hey, and by the way, God bless, Fiverr, Shopify, Duolingo, all these CEO memos that came out saying, hey, you're going to lose your job if not. But I don't think it works. With all due respect, I think what does work is saying, I'm the CEO of this company, and guess what? I'm figuring out AI too. And I have a 6-year-old daughter or 7-year-old daughter, and she spilled nail polish on the counter. And first of all, I need to figure out how to get it out. I need to figure out how to lovingly talk to my daughter about this. I need to know that she's loved while having kind of consequences. But really the idea that is what a leader says to his people or her people. Says, listen, I'm wrestling with this too. AI is supposed to go through you. If we don't have you, we hired you into this company to draw value and to produce value for this organization. It has to go through you because you're the only one that understands value.
Connor, I love that because it really speaks to like the emotional aspect of what it means to enroll someone. Okay, I want to get into a few more questions, and we don't have a lot of time, so this is our power round. Okay, this question comes, which doesn't mean talk faster.
Faster, got it. Check.
All right, this question comes from Chuck Sigmund. The biggest challenge is getting senior leadership buy-in. Where Chuck is, what suggestions do you have for those of us who use AI regularly to help leadership understand the value? How do we get them to buy in?
Show a process. Do not show what you're doing. Don't show the end result of something. What you want, while that's important, you want to show how you got your team leveled up and what's the actual process inside your team. Don't worry about the company. Inside your team that you changed and how you changed it.
I love that. Show, don't tell. That's a journalism truism too. Okay, this question comes from Italy, from Guyan, who says, it's about AI and HR and recruiting. How do you see AI being most effectively applied in HR and recruiting beyond just CV screening, which it's arguably not effective at?
So I have if you know the SHRM, the large HR organization. So I'm a member of the board of the foundation there because I'm really passionate about HR, almost above all else. And the reason is I think that HR leaders need to lead the AI adoption revolution. And so what I would say is it's not just about changing processes. It's who are you hiring? How are you hiring them? How are you finding the right talent? How are you sourcing the right talent? And ultimately, and most importantly, how do you upskill the entire organization? Because HR should own that.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, this question comes from Simon in the United Kingdom. What are the first one or two tasks you would give senior leaders so that they can start their journey with LLMs? You know, the most senior leaders, it's funny, the most senior leaders at organizations sometimes understand how the processes of daily life work the least.
100%. And that's almost by definition. They can't possibly understand everything. I think what leaders need to do, number one, is commit to upskilling the whole organization.
Yeah.
That is absolutely the case because who do you not want this technology to be in the hands of? You want a company filled with innovators, not just people who understand what the tool is, but how to think differently. Because then my theory on all this is that in the past, tech has been, jobs have been defined by the creators of the tech. And in the new world, leaders are just going to be looking around and over in building 6, over in the corner, they're going to see 3 people doing the work of 14. And they're going to go over and say, like, what are you doing? Very like Heart of Darkness kind of thing, right? And they're going to go over and they say, like, how are you producing this much? They're going to codify that process and then sort of start transferring it. So I think leaders are now have to be in sort of a supervisory role.
That's a really good way to think about it. Okay, this question comes from Manoj in India. What are some of the biggest challenges you've seen in helping teams build lasting AI habits, not just for early adopters, but across broader, less tech-savvy groups?
I think less tech-savvy groups are the best groups on all this, to be honest. You and I were talking about this, the fact that if you don't have a tech background, you're in a great position because often people who don't have a tech background, not to overgeneralize, if you're good at relationships, if you're good at talking, you are going to be the rulers of the universe. I say all the time, I really believe that liberal arts majors are going to rule the world of AI in the future.
I've been waiting for
Right,
that
me too. Thank you, Lord. Because here's the thing, like they know how to have conversations, how to critically think. Not that tech people don't, but tech people are thinking in a little more linear way. When you have non-technical groups, lean into them. Say, hey, use this in your processes. Show us what you have. Yeah. Those are the organizations that are really going to get their teams working and flying on this stuff.
Connor, I have to tell you, the chat is on fire. I get bits of it right here in my arms, and I just want to share a little bit of it with you. Heidi says, I've been loving this part of the AI revolution. Verbal skills are becoming as valuable as technical skills.
Amen, Heidi.
So good.
Amen.
Hannah says, imagination is crucial, as is the ability to think. Really thinking will set people apart. Agree with the habit of reflection. It's smart. Jeff says, love that there's a tie-in to change management as a solution to learning and deploying AI. I think change management, you would say, is kind of everything.
Number one.
Jason says, I love sharing my tech knowledge with others, doing the same with AI. The more we all know, the better. Rosalind, changing never knew it had a name for what I was already doing. Oh, chaining. I'm sorry.
Yes, chaining.
Rosalind,
yeah.
I also am going to go forward being able to name chaining and to be able to use it too. Okay, this comes from one. Actually, no, I take it back. I was going to give y'all the final question, but I want the final question. Okay, so we've heard a lot of tips today. I want one final habit that we can all take away.
Yeah. I think the one final habit is not just use it, is not just find your use cases. It's get on there and recognize the first thing I want you to tell yourself is it's okay that I'm not using this 20 times a day. It's because my brain is functioning very normally. It's because my brain thinks it's a search engine. It's because my brain it prefers patterns, everything like that. So take a deep breath, sit at your ChatGPT or Copilot or Gemini, whatever it is, and then just say, hey, I'm actually trying to figure out how to use this. Or, hey, you know what? I'm actually feeling really nervous about this test tomorrow. Or I'm feeling really, sort of apprehensive about this. Or I'm really excited about this. And just start a conversation. That's it. But don't try to find use cases. Don't worry about talking to it like a human. Just get there, sit there, talk. But most importantly, remember, this is a conversation. So start that conversation.
I love that. Thank you so much, Connor.
Thanks, Jesse.
Okay, folks, for everyone who has tuned in today, don't forget to share what stuck with you using the hashtag WatchWithPremium. I'm on LinkedIn all the time, and so is Connor, and we would love to be in conversation with you on these topics.